In the early morning light of June 10, 1912, a figure stepped out of a modest white frame house in Villisca, Iowa. They quietly locked the door behind them, wiped their hands, and vanished into the sunrise, leaving the town to wake up to a day that would change its history forever. Inside that silent house, 8 people lay dead in their beds, an entire family and 2 young neighbors. Yet, as the town marshal would soon discover, it wasn't just the brutality of the crime that was terrifying. It was the strange, almost ritualistic details left behind. Every mirror in the house had been draped with sheets, and a plate of uneaten food sat waiting on the kitchen table. The killer had not just visited, they had made themselves at home. To understand the gravity of this horror, one must first understand the setting. In 1912, Villisca was a prosperous, tight-knit community where doors were rarely locked and neighbors were like family. Josiah Moore was a successful businessman who lived in the white frame house with his wife Sarah and their 4 children. On that Sunday evening, the atmosphere in the town was joyous. The family had attended the Children's Day service at the Presbyterian Church, a night filled with celebration and community. 2 young neighbor girls, Lena and Ina Stillinger, had asked to stay the night with the Moore children. Around 9:30 p.m., the group of 8 walked home under the stars, ate some cookies, extinguished the lamps, and went to sleep. But they were not alone. Evidence found later suggested that the killer was already inside the house before the family even returned, hiding in a dark closet, waiting patiently for the house to fall into absolute silence. Sometime after midnight, the intruder emerged. They did not bring a weapon with them. Instead, they picked up an axe belonging to Josiah Moore from the backyard coal shed. The violence that followed was methodical and calculated. The killer began in the master bedroom with Josiah and Sarah. Chillingly, the killer used the blunt end of the axe rather than the blade, ensuring that the first blows rendered the victims unconscious immediately. There were no screams, no struggle. From there, the shadow moved from room to room, ending the lives of the 4 more children before descending the stairs to the guest bedroom. It was here, in the downstairs room where 12-year-old Lena and 8-year-old Ina were sleeping, that the only sign of resistance was found. Experts believe Lena was the only victim who woke up, as defensive marks were found on her arm. However, in the pitch blackness, against an armed intruder, she stood no chance. Once the deed was done, the killer did not flee in a panic. Instead, they stayed to perform a series of bizarre actions that still baffle investigators today. They covered the victims' faces with bedclothes and took garments from the dressers to cover every single mirror in the house. They even took a 2-pound slab of bacon from the icebox and placed it on the floor next to a piece of a keychain. Was it superstition, remorse, or a twisted signature? When the sun rose and the bodies were discovered, the investigation that followed was a chaotic disaster. Hundreds of townspeople, driven by morbid curiosity, walked through the crime scene, destroying potential evidence. Despite the confusion, 3 main theories emerged. The first shadow of suspicion fell on Frank Jones, an Iowa state senator and a fierce business rival of Josiah Moore. Rumors swirled that Jones had hired a hitman to teach Moore a lesson that spiraled out of control. But despite the intense gossip, no hard proof ever linked the politician to the crime. The second suspect was the Reverend George Kelly, He had been at the church service that night and was seen leaving town the next morning on a train, muttering to strangers about the murders before the bodies had even been discovered. Years later, he confessed to the police, rambling about voices telling him to slay utterly. But a jury, viewing him as mentally unstable rather than criminally guilty, acquitted him. The final theory pointed to a drifting serial killer. Detectives noted a string of similar axe murders in Illinois and Kansas around the same time. The pattern was always the same. The crimes occurred near train tracks, entire families were targeted, and the blunt end of the axe was always used. Despite grand jury hearings, private investigators, and confessions, no one was ever convicted for the murders of the Moore family and the Stillinger girls. The case remains one of America's most haunting, unsolved mysteries. The house still stands today at the end of a quiet street, restored to look exactly as it did in 1912 without electricity or running water. Visitors often claim to hear children laughing in the empty rooms or the sound of footsteps pacing the attic. But the only thing known for certain is that on a warm June night, evil walked into that house, finished its work, and walked away free.